Okay, so it's been a while since I did an update. Um, do one real quick. So this is my current lantern list. I'm kind of torn between this one and the next one that I'm going to show. I'll highlight the main things though. Big thing is Profane Tutor in the main, 4 of, mostly replacing Ancient Stirrings. Still running Stirrings as a 2 of. Um, 7 discard main is still the highlight. I am still doing 3 duress instead of any Inquisition Inquisition at Kozilek, mostly because of cards like the One Ring and the Great Creator and Force of Vigor. Still running the 3 trophy as the all-around good removal. The rest of this is pretty stock from what I've been running. Um, there are some changes to the mana base where I've been testing the pathways, and I'll get more into that too with the fetch lands build that I'm looking at for the sideboard. Um, so the data shows that Leyline is very, very, very good against burn. So there was a time there where I was testing without him. I am back to running 3 of them in the side. And that's one of the reasons why I'm going with the pathways, so that I can actually cast Leyline of Sanctity if I need to. But the turn 1 discard is so incredibly important with this deck, or the reliable discard. Um, and running a bunch of Glimmer Voids and Spire of Industry does not work for that. So I've been replacing the Glimmer Voids and Spires with ensuring that I have early discard effects. Um, I did go down to 2 Mycosynth Gardens because of that as well. Um, so going with 3 Nature's Claims, that's really to try to help shore up the Abysmal Titan Amulet Titan matchup. So we can destroy the sagas, our amulets, our dryads. Um, of course, it is also very useful against hammer and scales. I mean, we already have good matchups against hammer and scales, but I mean, I figure it's not bad to have additional sideboard removal if we need it, especially against like hammer. I have a recent video that I'll be uploading with this, where Nature's Claim legitimately saved me against hammer. But really, it's testing these because of the amulet matchup. Nihil Spellbomb, Stone of Eric are I've been running those for a while now. Those are mostly for the Living End and Yawgmoth matchups. Cursed Totem is for the Yawgmoth matchup and Hardened Scales. I mean, it's generally useful against a bunch of other stuff too. I mean, it's also useful against Scam to shut off their um, Dauthi Voidwalkers and their Kiki tokens. Damping Sphere is, again, it's to try to help shore up the Amulet Titan matchup, and it's also good against Coffers and Tron. Necromentia is for mostly the Tron, the Amulet matchup. It's I've been using it for Coffers as well, and general like combo decks. Like I mean, I guess it's useful against like Storm type stuff too. Um, I decided to try the one of Emrakul, and I was thinking about it this past week. So our mill matchup is pretty abysmal, and I realized that the chances of us keeping the mill opponent off of mill effects is basically impossible. But I realized that with all the discard and the lock, um, really, if we can make it so that all we have to keep the opponent off of is exile effects, that is much, much easier. So the plan is to side that in and then use the discard and the lock to make it so they can draw all the mill they want. Um, we just want to make it so they don't have exile effects like surgicals or hideous laughter. And then if we can do that, then they just cannot beat an Emrakul. Just cannot beat it. And then we just, win from there relatively easily. I still expect game 1 against Mill to be pretty bad, but Otherwise, it should be pretty easy, hypothetically. I haven't gotten to test it yet. Um, so this is the other build, and it's virtually identical. The only difference here is running Verdant Catacombs with 2 Godless Shrine and 1 Overgrown Tomb. Um, I try to shy away from using fetch lands and shock lands in Lantern because we use 100% of our mana in the first 3 turns. So if we're using fetch lands and shock lands, that means we are causing a lot of self-inflicted pain. But as I've been testing the pathways, I've noticed that something that we can do is we can just fetch out basics on turn 1 and turn 2. Um, and if we fetch out basics, that's the same thing as playing a pathway. We just pay a life for it, really. And one of the side effects of this is it makes it a lot easier to play against Blood Moon decks. And we can use it to shuffle our top if we need to. Regardless, though, it does mean that we will have some self-inflicted pain due to this. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 points of damage that we can do to ourselves with this if we're not careful. Later on in the game, though, we can play the shock lands into play tapped and not worry about it. But this should hypothetically help us with being able to reliably cast Leyline if we draw it against Burn or other decks that we want to play that against. Really, it's just Burn, but whatever. Why does it say 76 cards? I must have missed something here. It should not be 76. Oh, I have an extra land somewhere. See, 2 gardens, 1 tomb. Yeah, I mean, I guess 23 lands isn't so bad. But I think I would probably cut. Ooh, that's a rough one. I guess a catacombs. I don't know. Um, but yeah, I mean, I would want to keep the 2 swamps. um, but yeah. Anyways, here's the current data that we have. As you can imagine, Bridge is the top performing card, and then the regular cards on top of that are all pretty good. Spire of Industry, I don't think it really matters a whole lot. I think that's in Glimmer Void. I think those are holdovers. I think those are less good now because of all the artifact destruction that is present in the metagame. I think Leyline's numbers are getting bumped up because how good it is against Burn. But yeah, let's see. Then down here, yeah, Academy Ruins isn't great for us in the opener. Our win rate drops from 60 to 39% with that in our opener. So that colored mana is pretty important. And Academy Ruins is almost nothing for us in the early game. Surgical Extraction, it drops a decent amount too, 6.8%. Of course, this is all weighed for sample size. So if you have a larger number in the sample size, that means that we have a much larger sample size to go off of, plus or minus. Now we do have negative numbers for the cards like Codex Shredder, but notice it's only really dropping a 1% win rate. The reason why it's ranked so low is because the sample size is so large. But really, of course, we're going to keep Codex Shredder. Grab Tigger's Cage, not great, but it's one of those cards that single-handedly helps so much with Yawgmoth. But I could see people, if you wanted to try out Stone of Eric main or something instead. I've just found Grafdigger's Cage is extremely good against the Yawgmoth matchup, which is kind of important with Yawgmoth being like the top. It's like the Rhinos and then Yawgmoth are the top 2 decks right now, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so let's see. For the additional data points, it does look like we want 2 to 3 lands in hand. That's the obvious, I guess. It's pretty common. See, a Lantern and Millrock, our win rate does go up with 1 Lantern, 1 Millrock. let's see, we don't have any data on scheming symmetry yet. With the bobble and mill rock, it's about even. Um, no data on symmetry yet. For mulligan win rates, of course, we have our highest win rate when we keep a full hand of 7. For the sideboard cards in hand, um, let's see, it looks like as our sideboard cards go up, our win rate does go up. Of course, the confidence limit isn't great on that. So I don't know that it matters too much because the opponent also does get to bring in sideboard cards, so I think that probably affects our win rate a decent amount. Average casting cost, let's see, our play and draw win rates are virtually identical. And then it looks like we do want discard spells in our hand, somewhere between 1 and 2. And then once we hit 3, it's not as good, obviously. We also have the data weighed with the binomial distribution method. It's virtually identical to the method that I did. We have some statistics on the matchups. I highlighted in green all the ones that are above 10 games or matches or matches. So yeah, Amulet Titan is not a good matchup for us. Ad Nauseam isn't so bad at all. They kind of need a ley line. Burn is not great. Ley lines are very, very important there. Beans doesn't exist anymore, but it was good. Especially, the Cascade Beans. Coffers, not a whole lot of data on the matches. Games we have a decent amount of data on, but it looks like we're about 50-50. Creativity, it looks like we're slightly favored. Domain Zoo looks like we're pretty favored. Let's see, Grixis Control has historically been a bad matchup. Hammer Time and Scales, both good matchups. See, Living End, a good matchup. Mardu Reanimator, that's mostly my local meta. Merfolk, good historically. Mill, abysmal, but this is before. I still haven't gotten a chance to test out the Emrakul game plan, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully it gets better. Murktide's a good one. Pre-ban Scam doesn't exist anymore, which is unfortunate because it was good. Rhinos is a good matchup, and that's actually we have getting a lot of games in on Rhinos. Tron is abysmal. Hopefully the new sideboard plan will help with that. Yawgmoth, a lot of this data came before we started playing Cursed Totems, so this is like slowly increasing over time. It was abysmal for a while there, but then once we started playing Cursed Totems, and I think Profane Tutors have had an effect as well, the matchup is slowly started to get better and better. I know these sample sizes are kind of small. It is only like 10 games, 10 plus games. Well, this is 24 and 48. However, I think that's kind of deceiving if we were to assume that the sample sizes aren't enough. So, for example, I don't think anybody's going to try to argue that the sample size on the Tron matchup doesn't properly reflect that the Tron matchup is abysmal for Lantern. I think Magic is one of those games where, yes, it's good to have more data, but there are some matchups that are very, very polarized, and Lantern is one of those decks that you kind of have polarized matchups. There's very, very few like 50-50 matchups with Lantern. You're usually either very favored against it, or favored against something, or unfavored, and it's very rare that it is closer to the 50-50. I think you can see Murktide is kind of one of the closest we got there with the decent sample size, and a lot of that is basically, do they get the Ragavan start or don't they? And if they don't, then we do pretty good for ourselves. So yeah, we have a decent number of games now, 712 games because the first row is the header row. So 712 games of data, and still collecting. So hopefully this helps. Um, I think if you were looking at trying to build Lantern, this is probably the list I would go with, or that I would advise on, and then just find a way to cut a land. I prefer to keep the basics here. I mean, I can see cutting a Glimmer Void because those things have cost me games. So, all right.